Welcome to At the Heart of It, where we talk about life, celebrate creativity, and champion entrepreneurship by getting to the heart of the why behind what we do. And I am joined today, my guest is Nicolas Beique from Helcim. Thanks so much for joining me, Nicolas.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So the first time you and I met, I can't even remember. I think I reached out over LinkedIn. Is where we first met. And I was so fascinated by there being a payments company in Calgary when all I had known of payments was Stripe and Square and PayPal. But knowing that the headquarters for another payments providing or payments processing company was in Calgary, I thought it was fascinating. So you were gracious with your time, and we sat down and talked about another one of my businesses called Tillin, and gave us some really great advice. But I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit of the backstory, maybe even your entrepreneurial journey a little bit to start, of how you founded Helcim and what also Helcim is all about.
Sure. I'll start from the very beginning.
The origin story.
So this company was starting about 13 years ago. I was 23 years old. And it took a long time to really kind of get it off the ground. You can probably imagine that when you're 23 years old and you're knocking on the doors of banks to like give you the keys to the kingdom, they are not quick to do that. And we didn't know the industry to the point where we didn't know the right terminology to even like ask, we want to be this type of partner or this type of provider or things like that, right? So it took over 2 years for us to find a bank partnership to finally kind of give us a little bit of an inch so we could kind of get into this space, right?
Right.
And it took a while for us to kind of find our groove. We didn't quite know. We started off as more of a shopping cart and focused on e-commerce. But people didn't really care so much about our shopping cart at the time, but they really liked our payments. And we're like, okay, well, maybe that's the true kind of offering behind it. And we pivoted to that. And it took some years to kind of figure out what's our place in the market. Why do people like us? What's working, what's not. And especially at that age, like when you're 23, 24, and you're starting a business, you don't have a whole lot of experience. You don't have a whole lot of connections or money or anything like that, but you do have time.
Right.
And you kind of lean into that. And finally, fast forward to about 6 years ago, we went from 2 people to now 90. Wow. And that's when we finally kind of found our place and figured out how to do this thing.
Yeah. Well, and I saw on LinkedIn, am I right, if you're approaching 15 years of Helcim, which is incredible. To go from 2 people to over 90. What has that trajectory kind of been like for you over the last 15 years? Has it really been kind of that traditional hockey stick curve of?
I think the hockey stick is kicking in now.
Yeah.
I think that for most of the, if you kind of go back on the first kind of 7 years, it was us kind of running in the dark, trying to figure out, who we were and how these things work. And it really wasn't a startup at a time. Like I wouldn't have called it that. It was, a small business trying to figure out how to, find the next customer and make a little bit of money to try to one day pay ourselves a salary. And it was very much that mentality. I think even the word startup wasn't really part of the Calgary kind of vocabulary at the time, right? No. Like, raising money and things like that, 13 years ago wasn't really what you did. You just kind of start a company and hope that you could find some way to please customers and make a bit of revenue. And I think that we really kind of shifted in terms of the type of company we are, the appetite that we have to build this thing. That really kind of shifted about 6-ish years ago, and that's when we kind of started really climbing.
That's amazing. And so when you talk about having that amount of time early on in the company, were you always kind of interested in coding and building stuff, and was that always something that you were interested in? Like, why payments? Like, so early on, like, it's not sexy, really. If you're thinking of the tech world, it's not like a sexy thing to want to spend that time on. So, what was kind of the catalyst for you to start within on the project?
It's funny you mentioned that. Like, if when my wife wants to fall asleep, she's like, "Tell me more about like Visa interchange rates." She's like out in 60 seconds. So I mean, I started off one of the first kind of jobs or entrepreneurship I undertook was I started building websites.
Okay.
You're
classic.
You're kid in the 90s. You start building websites. And one of the first that turned actually into a part-time job working at a local computer store called Memory Express, where they needed an e-commerce website. And they hired me in the afternoon. I was in high school and I started coding their site, right? I always been, programmer from an early age, and started building their first site, and said, okay, maybe we can turn that into a company. And that turned into kind of building e-commerce websites for other entrepreneurs. And we saw the struggle of accepting payments. At the time, there really wasn't much. There was PayPal, kind of Moneris. You had to jump through a lot of hoops to try to get it connected, and try to, even if you, at that time, if you wanted to sign up with Moneris, you had to put huge safety deposits down. That's how much friction there was, right? Like maybe there's something there that we could turn the whole thing into like a turnkey offering. And we understood that the payments were an important part of it. We just didn't realize how much how much of a headwind we were kind of walking into. Right. But like I said earlier, we had time, and we just kind of kept going at it until finally, kind of like a crack showed, and we could try to wedge our way into that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So my whole purpose for this podcast, and I'm always fascinated with this, always have been, is the why behind what we do. And obviously it's the one-liner. And I'm curious for you, like, why payments specifically? And I know you are such an advocate for entrepreneurship and small business. I mean, the fact that you took an hour and a half out of your day to just sit down with two randoms.
I'm happy to be here.
I know, but when we first chatted, and our business is still kind of in the infancy stages, but you were giving tactical advice, books to read, and also kind of helping us. We obviously have kind of switched our donations over to Helcim, which has been a really pleasant experience. But I've seen a lot of small business support there. If that's more or less the why, kind of what was the impetus for that? Like, where did that start? Where did that come from? And why payments?
Why payments? So the thing about payments is that on the surface it looks boring, right? Because it's just like you're dealing with, it's a financial service. You're dealing with a lot of regulations. You're dealing with reconciliation, balance payments and things like that. Things that make some people fall asleep. But the reality is, if you look right below the surface, payments are the heartbeat of commerce. And I have had an opportunity by taking on this challenge of being kind of behind the scenes of so many businesses that I would have, dreamed of seeing, right? So anything from, giant, malt manufacturers that serve microbreweries, right? To behind the scenes at, one of our big, we primarily focus on small business, but one of our big merchants is Michelin, right? And being behind the scenes of a big company like that, and then anything in between in terms of like restaurants and towing companies and dentists, and like I get to meet, especially at the beginning when I was the one salesperson, right? And like you kind of get to go behind that door that says private, and you get to really talk to business owners, and like payments are such a core part of everything they do. You get like kind of a front row seat to the world of business, and that's a pretty unique place to be. There's tons of software companies out there, but they're not that intimate with like the need of a business like payments is. And I think that's a privileged place to be.
Absolutely.
So I think that's probably one of the big, that's not necessarily the reason why we started it originally. It felt more at the time just a business opportunity because it was underserved, but it turned into a love of this industry. It's like, oh wow, we get to have a front row seat, and that's really cool. And we get to meet all these amazing people.
Right. That to me is my favorite part of what we do with even at Heart Creative, is being able to go behind the scenes, learn about the business, get under the hood, as you will. To truly understand some of their struggles, some of their problems, and then hopefully provide those solutions. So it's not just kind of providing a product and see you later. It's actually building that relationship and learning from there. Have there been any like really key big learnings that you can think of off the top of your head that you've kind of learned from customers going through that process?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. So because we're a bootstrap company, so we've never done venture capital.
Which is amazing, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, it definitely is. That was really leaning into the time it takes. It's certainly slower when you go that route. Yeah. To kind of build your foundation, but because of that, we very much understand the struggles of what it was like for years to just be stressed every night going to bed and not be able to sleep and thinking, how do I get one more customer? And then on top of that stress of being squeezed by vendors when, you need your business needs a service, whether it's a, telephone service or payment service, whatever it is, right? And you sign up and you're like, okay, I've done my research. I think this is the right one. And then have them, if they were dishonest during the sales process, or they start jacking up the rates after, things like that. And just that awful feeling of getting squeezed that way, because you're already a small business owner, you're struggling, you're trying to make it all work, and you gave a business your trust and they just abused it. I think that's a lesson that very much, that feeling really has stuck with me, and that's some of the drive behind why our we recently updated our mission statement to kind of hone in terms of like really what makes Helcim. And we landed on to be the world's most loved payments company. And loved is a very charged word, and we're very proud of it, right? Because in order to love your payments company or a service provider in general, it means great customer service. It means a level of trust. It means caring. It means being compassionate. It means bring a great offering, right? And I think that feeling of getting squeezed when you're a small business owner kind of has translated into like, we never want to, not only do we not want to create that kind of experience for anybody that we serve, but we want to really lean into making them feel like they made the right choice and they are being supported in this pretty harsh journey that they're embarking on. Yeah.
I feel like everybody has one of those stories where they trusted a company, they did their research, they probably spent way too much time doing that. And then regretted it afterwards. I mean, whether it's a cell phone company, cell phone provider, or like a payments provider. But what I also find really, really interesting is also the model that you've built around payments. So you did such a great job of explaining it to us when we sat down with you about a year ago now. And I would love for you to kind of share that what makes Helcim different in that way,
right,
is the Interchange Plus. And I know Interchange Plus, people are like, what is that? But can you speak to really what that big difference is that Helcim provides?
Yeah, I mean, the seed of it behind, it's all about transparency and creating an environment of trust, right? So a lot of times in payments, especially nowadays, people think about flat rates. So you think about PayPal, 2.9% plus 30 cents, although PayPal just announced they're jacking that up for the first time in a long time.
Interesting.
So that's not even a bigger opportunity for us to keep going after their business. But the reality is that the credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, they have actually a lot of fluctuation in their rates, the wholesale rates, which are called the interchange rates. And so the rates, the true kind of cost is actually a lot lower, right? And what we decided to do, there's something that at the time, we didn't invent it, but it was something that was only being offered to large businesses, which was essentially Interchange Plus, or kind of wholesale plus or cost plus kind of thing, right? Which is like, we'll pass the true cost on to you, and we'll negotiate a margin for our service and us taking on that financial risk. And at least what the true rate is, what our margin is. It's very transparent. But that was only offered to big enterprise clients. And we kind of spun that on its head and said, what if we offered that to everyone? And we were the first ones to do that in North America. And at first, it's actually kind of complex because it is a complex topic. And it took a lot of time to figure out, how do we package that in a way that a small business owner that cares about a million other things than payments, right? How do we put that in a way that they can understand it?
Yeah.
And it took a little bit. Finally, we cracked it, and we kind of able to kind of display it and explain it. And finally, it caught on, and people are going like, what, I can get the rates that the big guys get, and that matters, because the reality is like payments payments does become commoditized, and it businesses feel like it's a tax on them, and getting a lower rate matters. Like the difference being paying 3% and 2% is huge to the bottom line of a business.
Massive, massive. And that's what I found so fascinating is, you have an American Express Platinum card that probably has one of the, if not the highest interchange rates, right? And then you've got like kind of the cashback Visa. But if there's so many more people have a cashback Visa, then you are actually paying less in fees.
Exactly. And the way that a lot of times the processors will price themselves, whether that's a Square or a Stripe or a PayPal or anything like that, is that they'll just kind of like they'll do a flat rate that kind of covers their butt no matter what.
Right.
And so but then the majority of the cards are actually like much lower. So they're just making huge margins under the disguise of a simple flat rate. But it ends up costing business owners a ton.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So do you still have that calculator on the site?
Yeah.
Because that was what blew my mind, was when you actually listed all of the different cards and the percentage of people that use them and all that kind of stuff. So if you are a small business or a business in general that is looking at different payment providers, it was mind-blowing to me, actually, even just looking at the calculator and going, man, this actually would make a big difference.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you don't only do online payments either. You've got some POS systems and point of sale purchase
Exactly. Yeah. So we've really grown since our beginning, and essentially now it's not a sexy word, omni-commerce kind of thing, right? But it's all about like having a one platform where you need to accept payments through a card reader at your front desk or on the go, or you need to send out invoices and accept payments, remotely, or you're doing all the way up to e-commerce or APIs or things like that. We have one platform that lets you just accept all that, and it takes 5 minutes to sign up. So we've really tried to like knock down the barriers and kind of really change what the experience has been of people in this space. Mm-hmm. And not to forget, the rates are super important in this industry, and we really lean into that. Having the right software is super important, but most importantly, we've really learned early. That's another lesson, that customer service really, really matters in this space, and it actually becomes a competitive differentiator. But people ignore it. Like it's just for the longest time. Square didn't even have a phone number that you can call, and then when you do call right now, it's still not the greatest experience, right? Versus we have we treat our customer service team like rock stars. I think that a lot of people see those roles as kind of like a entry level into a company. They don't have they don't have high compensation or things like that. High turnover, and then that ends up being reflected on the customer, right? Everybody says, "Oh, customer's number one," but it's like, but then your front person that is your touch point to your customer, you're treating him the worst. So how is your customer number one, right? So we kind of decided to take a different approach, which is like, we are going to compensate our team really well. We're going to invest into them. We're going to treat them like rock stars, and then in return, they're going to treat our customers with that same love and respect. And now 90% of our online reviews, our 5-star reviews, mention our customer service, and typically mention somebody by name. They'll say AJ was amazing, or Jackie was amazing, Morella was amazing, and that's such a great feeling, because it's just another touch point where the customer kind of realize, okay, they made a good choice and they're not getting squeezed by a provider that doesn't care.
For sure. Well, and I remember walking down, like, you have the whole floor here, which is awesome, but that whole backside is pretty much customer service. And the crazy thing for me was then being on like the client side, after you gave us the tour, is somebody actually reached out because we hadn't completed part of the process properly yet. And they were like, hey, just saw this, just wanted to follow up. And it was an actual person. It wasn't necessarily a computer. Exactly. And went, hey, happy to chat with you anytime you want to walk through this if you need additional support. And I know, for me, I'm not even the one working on the back end of our product. And I'm like, that is amazing. And then Brett, who is working on the backside of the product, is able to reach out to somebody anytime. And I think that's incredibly special, especially in the tech community. And speaking of that, I'm fascinated as to why Calgary is HQ. I know you have an office in Seattle, right? Which that to me totally makes sense. But it was really interesting seeing a true tech company in Calgary, in our backyard, where everybody still thinks it's an oil town, but you talk about the vacancy downtown, and COVID obviously didn't help with that. But why Calgary? And what has that process been like?
I mean, there's no, I wish I had an answer like, oh, we looked at all the dynamics of all the cities and this was the best. And it's Calgary's home. That's the real answer. It's like Calgary's home. I originally grew up in Montreal. So I grew up French, moved here when I was 12, and Calgary very much became home, right? And so now it's more about kind of realizing how special Calgary really is. Because I think when you're a teenager and you dream of New York, you dream of the big city,
you take it
right?
for granted, for sure.
Exactly, but then realizing that Calgary is this pretty amazing place where you've got it's right in that sweet spot. You've got 1.4 million people, so you've got talent, you've got things to do. You've got these amazing kind of universities, and there's a ton of STEM talent in Calgary, right? You've got one of the youngest cities, both in terms of when it was incorporated, but also in terms of the average age of the citizens, right? And the cost of living is still very reasonable compared to, think Montreal, or Vancouver or Toronto or things like that, right? So all these things are lined up, and Calgary's just looking for its shot. And one thing that we decided to do, you hear about tech and you hear about them struggling for talent, right? Because there hasn't been enough of that, senior talent development in town, right? We've never had that struggle because we do something called bottom-up hiring. It actually came from us being a bootstrap company where, originally we couldn't afford to, get those senior developers, right? So we were said, what can we afford? Well, we can afford that fresh grad out of the state that nobody else wants to give her, her first job, but we said we can, right? And what it turned into is that, to this day, people are still not hiring those juniors, but we are. So we get to pick, the amazing one to join our journey, and then we just invest into them. Yes, it takes a little longer to get people off the ground, but because everybody here has been trained that way, there is nobody pushes back. I can drop, and that's my expectation on day one, and I let everybody know that torch kind of gets passed on. I can drop anybody of any background, of any technical ability, of any junior, level into any department, and the immediate gut reaction of that department needs to be to lift up that person. And because they've all been trained, they're like, well, I was in your seat 6 months ago. Yeah, I'm going to turn my chair and help you out, kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that all of those things are why Calgary is our choice, but it's also our home.
There you go. Well, I want to dig into culture really quick, but I have a really important question to ask you. I don't know if you're a hockey fan, but are you a Calgary Flames fan, or are you going to be a Seattle Kraken fan now that you've got? So,
it's funny. I grew up as an Abs fan.
Okay, right.
Right.
Like, so how heartbreaking is it that they didn't win the cup this year too?
I think that what I remember moving here is that we would go to the games because the Flames and the Abs for a long time had the New Year's Eve game.
Right.
On the 31st, that was the two teams, and that was really fun. And I was never to a point where I could cheer on both teams, and I just enjoyed the whole going out to see a game and eating pretzels. But yeah.
There you go. I'm with you. I was just curious because I'm interested to see how the Kraken does. I already love their brand and how they've built the whole thing. The fact that one of their owners is the producer of Pirates of the Caribbean and all that kind of stuff. I love the story. But back to the culture piece. You just gave me an amazing T-shirt, which the design is awesome.
This entire company's ploy is just to be the best T-shirts in tech.
Exactly.
It's a front.
I think you're definitely out in front on that. But your employee handbook is super engaging, and you shared that on LinkedIn. Actually, you were super transparent about what that looks like, and I would love for you to kind of dig a little bit deeper on kind of that culture piece. You talk about hiring people that are fresh out of university. Obviously, you must have a lot of systems and processes in place so that that person can learn those systems and processes if they haven't experienced the same level of job somewhere else. But yeah, can you just speak to your philosophy around corporate culture just in general?
Sure. So the book you were talking about is called The Way of the Helcim, which it is a bit of broken English, and that's just a little nod to me, my broken English.
Yeah.
But yeah, we decided to put it publicly recently, so it's helcim.com/theway, right? And we decided, culture is so important to us, and recruiting the right people into our team is so important. Why don't we just put it out there, and I think it can help other entrepreneurs in terms of them creating the right culture for themselves, but also it's really kind of showing the world who we are, and showing interested parties out there like, hey, this might be the company for you, right? For us, I boil it down to culture in terms of the feeling you get when you walk in the door every morning to the office, right? That analogy doesn't always work with COVID and remote work, but is it are you excited? Because yes, there's tons of work to do, and you're in a startup with a capital S. We're ambitious, but you're surrounded by amazing people, and they're driven, and they're passionate, and they want to help you, and you have good managers, and you feel supported. Or do you have a pit in your stomach because you don't feel supported? Your bosses are just kind of raining down orders, they're not listening, there's politics, people are mean, or they slam doors, or they yell, or whatever is the case, kind of thing. And we work really, really hard to make sure that it's the former. And, we set kind of those expectations from day one. And I think that that's important. In order for us to be the world's most loved payments company, you can't do that without a group of people that like truly believe in the mission, that are super passionate about it, that kind of go above and beyond with every interaction that they have, whether it's with customers or with vendors or with each other. And I think it really came down to, it's just building a place that I want to work at. And I have worked at in odd jobs here and there when I was younger, in places that I truly did not appreciate or did not appreciate me. And I'm like, nah, I'm going to build a company that just you want to go to every day.
Yeah, kind of scratching your own itch.
Yeah.
To kind of get that ball rolling. You also spoke really briefly about before we started recording the vlog. And how you spent, what did you say, 36 weeks?
37 weeks.
37 weeks. Every week you're putting out a video kind of documenting the journey. And that audience ended up being potential employees and almost more of a recruitment tool than it was anything else. Like kind of what was the idea to start that, and kind of where is that now?
Yeah, I think originally the vlog, and that was about 3 years ago when we started it, we're like, we want to speak, video is super important, and we want to just show the world who we are. What we didn't know at the time is that, and that was a big lesson, is like we didn't know who our audience was, and we should have probably figured that out before we started it, and went on this crazy journey. But essentially, is our audience our customers? Is it local Calgary? Is it entrepreneurs? And you could feel that in some episodes. We didn't know who we were talking to, but we enjoyed making it, and it was like an inside look at a rising tech company and what goes on behind the scenes. But we couldn't figure that out, and finally we decided to pull the plug. But what started happening afterwards is that nearly every person that came into an interview said, I've watched all the videos, I've watched the vlog, I love the culture, I love the people, I want to work here. And we're like, oh, that was the audience. And so, it's funny because, a ton of staff here goes like, when is it coming back? When is it coming back? Like they saw it and it ended, about 2.5 years ago, and they're like, I never got to be part of an episode. I want to be part of it. Right? So, we actually relaunched it really recently. It's on the videos on our careers page. And what we decided to do, one every week was a little bit madness. What we're going to do is we're going to do one, every 3 to 6 months, kind of keep it fresh. And it's just going to be about our culture, our people, and working here. We know it's a great recruitment tool because it's candid, it's honest, and it shows, when you think about joining a company, you see the slick website and you see the headlines, but you really
see the core values, you see what they say they're about.
Exactly. But you don't know what you're joining, right? And it's like, we really hope that this gives a sense of like what they are joining, and hopefully that'll attract the best talent to us.
That's awesome. I want to be super respectful of your time, and we're going to start to wrap up here. But before we get to rapid fire, which is my favorite part of the interview every time, is you were, again, so gracious with your time and also connections when we met and introduced us to a couple of your mentors kind of throughout that your time building Helcim over the last almost 15 years. Can you speak to the importance of having those mentors throughout your career, and also how you've kind of found them within Calgary, with a lot of them probably being kind of oil and gas. I know the one that I'm thinking of, I believe he was in oil and gas, but was also kind of on the tech side. Yep. Can you speak to kind of what that overarching entrepreneurial culture is in this city, which I think is a really, really special piece of this city? Like I have not experienced that really anywhere else, especially in this country. But can you speak to that feeling of
so it didn't start out that way. So I definitely built this company originally kind of like in a cave. So it was about like 3-4 years ago where I decided to go to my first like tech entrepreneur event.
Okay.
And like it was actually it was a bit unhealthy because it was at the time, you're building, we went from building a small company to like trying to build a startup, and but you're always self-conscious about like, oh, we're not big enough. We only have 10 staff or whatever the case was, kind of at the time. Right. And there's this kind of unhealthy thing in the tech space about like, image. Cause you read, BetaKit and Tech Vibes and, TechCrunch and everything like that. And all you see is like these huge funding rounds and these amazing offices and these like, crazy
just money
rises
being thrown everywhere.
Yeah, and then you compare it to you're kind of in the weeds. You're trying to build your first business, and you're like, well, okay, I'm failing, or that's not, I'm not doing it right or anything like that. And I compare it to, growing up and looking at magazines of like, beautiful people, and that's like an unhealthy image that's being set for like what beauty is, right?
Right.
And I think the tech does it in terms of like what, the unhealthy image, you take, the 0.1% and you say, oh, that's normal, right? That's what, success is in tech, right? And so I think that's what kind of caused me to like, I didn't want to get myself out there. And until about, 3-4 years ago, did my first tech event and realized like, oh, we had built, one of the biggest companies in town already. But so I felt kind of silly to even have those thoughts in the first place. And more importantly, I could have benefited so much early on for like meeting those people, making connections, talking to mentors and things like that. So that's a lesson to anyone out there, which is like, it doesn't matter how small your business is, just be proud of it, go talk about it, go meet people, and don't wait until like you're of a certain size, because you're going to miss out on all these amazing connections, right? In terms of what you talked about, Calgary is a pretty amazing place when it comes to that. I think that even in the days of oil and gas, it was very much like a can-do attitude, handshakes.
Absolutely. Yep.
Everybody knows each other. Everybody's willing to introduce each other. And that has continued in tech, even more so because tech was such an underdog. Now we're starting to get headlines, but it took a while. It was such an underdog industry that like everybody knew each other and everybody was willing to be supportive. It was all like kind of frenemies and like everybody's willing to introduce you to whoever you want. And I think that's very much that feeling to this day. So I would say, if you're starting that kind of business and you're you can get to anybody in Calgary within like 2 conversations. Yeah. You just have to ask. You just have to ask and somebody will introduce you.
No, for sure. I think you bring up a really interesting point that I personally experienced even more so in like the music industry, in that time of going, you see all these artists that are seeming like they're doing really, really well, but realizing that they're an X amount of debt technically, but pretty much debt to the label or what have you. And they're really not doing well, but they're playing big stages but if you're an independent artist and you're able to retain a lot of the ownership of what your art and all that kind of stuff. But again, being able to go out and actually network with people, it's, my dad always says, and I'm sure he stole it from somebody else, it's the who, not how. Right. And it's about who you can talk to, who can help you, who can do the job better than you can, who can you bring in, from a cultural standpoint or from a hiring standpoint that can make the difference. So awesome. Well, we're going to get into rapid fire here. So
I'm ready and nervous.
Awesome. So. Ready and nervous. It shouldn't be nervous. There's like 8 or 9 questions. They start pretty quick and then we'll get a little bit deeper near the last 3. But the first one is, what is one book you feel everybody should read? There's a book that, there's tons of like books I put people on on people's plates to kind of read. But the one that I really click with, it's called The Messy Middle. Yep. You recommended that to us, and I have it on my shelf at home. It's a good one.
It's just a great, especially if you're like, a lot of people kind of shy away from business books, but this is like just a nice way to kind of get into his little like tidbits advice, and like it's really great. Yeah,
that's a good one. What is your favorite song, either right now or of all time?
Oh, Chris Isaak, Wicked Game. That's like, I'll loop that.
That's awesome. Salty snack or sweets?
Salty.
Do you have a favorite salty snack?
No, I'm not a big snack guy.
No.
So yeah, I'm not, which is good, but yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like in moment, put a bag of Skittles in front of me and I'll like devour it.
I'm with you. It's funny. Did you know Dustin and Connor from Local Laundry at all?
Yep.
Okay. So Dustin was on, we had them both on the show, and Dustin said a granola bar. And I was like, that is the lamest answer that anybody could give for that, for that question. Lazy beach vacation or crazy travel adventure?
Lazy beach vacation.
Do you have a favorite destination?
So probably one of the best trips I ever did was a place called Belize.
Yeah.
So it's like you have the ABCs in the Caribbean, Aruba, Belize, and Curacao. And Belize is that like the little unknown island, and it's just awesome.
I've heard very good things, and definitely want to hit that up. What is your favorite TV show or movie?
A movie I can loop. Thomas Crown Affair, the second remake with Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo. Like I that's like a ritual every 6 months that I'll play that.
There you go. That's awesome. What is your favorite local small business here in Calgary?
Favorite local small business. I mean, they're not as small anymore. I definitely have a sweet spot for Kinjo Sushi because they were the first to say yes to me.
That's awesome.
And we've built a really great relationship. So, I mean, there's tons of amazing businesses in Calgary, and we have these amazing relationships with them. But the one that said yes, has a special place in your heart.
No kidding. That's amazing. Well, and also to be able to kind of grow with them too.
Very much so.
That's fantastic. Do you have one quote that you live by?
I joke. It's funny. I joke a lot with every time we hire somebody on our infrastructure team, and they deal with like servers and encryption and security and things like that. I always give them the Spider-Man quote. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes, Uncle Ben.
And it's funny. It's a bit of a joke, but at the same time, it is a great quote.
It is a great quote. It is a great quote. Who is someone that you would like to thank for helping you get to where you are today, and why?
Oh, my wife, Leslie. I mean, it's just like, there's no way. I mean, it's just like, she supported my broke ass for so many years. And, she's never lost, no matter how dark the days got, she never lost faith in me. And like, I think, behind, a lot of times behind an entrepreneur, there's a very supportive partner.
Absolutely. And it may even be somebody that doesn't fully understand what's going on.
But they
there.
have faith, and that's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I could say the exact same about my wife, so I love that answer. If there was one piece of advice that you could share with a younger version of yourself, what would that be?
I think it would be get out of your own head and meet more people and get out there and test ideas and talk more to people and just, spend less time. The countless hours I've spent on that keyboard has ultimately built this company, but it could have been a mixture of that and interacting with great people much earlier.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's only so much you can only make a product so great without anybody knowing about it.
Exactly.
So that's great advice. Well, Nicolas, again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me on At the Heart of It. If anybody wants to learn more about Helcim, or maybe watch all the vlogs, where can they get more information?
So helcim.com is our website, HELCIM. And then I do have a kind of standing policy for LinkedIn, which is I accept all requests. So if you want to chat, if you want to talk to me, how to ask advice or whatever it is, just send me a LinkedIn request and I'll accept it.
And I can guarantee, because I am living proof, that he will actually answer you. So awesome, Nicolas. Thanks so much for joining me.
It was great. Thanks for having me.